And joining us at the mic is a fan favorite from our Auto Supply Chain Profits audience, and that is Fred Coe. Fred is the chair of the EDI Advisory Committee at AIAG. Fred, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. I'm getting comfortable in this seat now. I might be applying for a full-time role here.
Did you know you were a fan favorite with our audience?
I did not.
You do now.
So, Fred, what did you have to share today in the session?
I had a great time. We had a really good turnout. I thought the audience was engaged, but we talked about the survey that we did back in February about augmenting EDI with APIs, and there seemed to be some interest there. Talked about the survey results and the paper that still needs to come out and getting that out. We talked a little bit about Catena-X. A lot of good questions about Catena-X. I know it's new or newer to the North American industry. It's more mature in Europe. It was the first a number of our audience members heard of Catena-X, so we had a lot of good questions. And we talked a little bit about some ASN updates over at GM. So it was a good session.
And we were so grateful that Jim was in the audience because he was our expert on Catena-X and taking a lot of questions. But it's great for you to see, though.
Yeah, no, I was very surprised how many questions and interests were around Catena-X. I was glad I was in the room. I was trying not to hijack your show up there. You guys did a great job up at the front of the room. But yeah, it was interesting to hear the audience's questions, and definitely people were engaged and interested. And I'm glad we have a ton of resources on our website, AIG.org. If you're listening and you're wondering what Catena-X is all about or some of the use cases, definitely go to AIG.org to take a look. Ava is our new virtual assistant, AVA.
Love that, by the way.
Yeah, it's really cool. She walks across the She looks at our resident knowledge about AIAG publications, and first one's free kind of thing. You got to take a look and take a cue on what Ava's got to say. So ask her what Catena-X is and what it means for the future of automotive for sure.
Everybody was in the session that Fred had. What did you take away? I took away everybody is saying, please, whatever you do, standardize, right?
Yes.
That was one takeaway that I had. What did you take away from the audience today?
Yeah, I would say there was a little bit of apprehension over what's changing with EDI. I think people love and are married to their traditional EDI systems, and they're kind of one eye open on this Catena-X thing, right? So I think my takeaway was people are a little bit cautious maybe, but they were definitely interested to hear what you guys had to say up there. So really, really great session.
I got the, hey, it's working, just don't mess with it. That's the feeling that I got out there. What about you, Fred?
I heard the same thing about standardization. They want standards, not guidelines. There's some fear that with Catena-X, with APIs, that the OEMs and the tier ones will come together and say, yep, we're going to do one thing, and then it ends up splintering off. So that seemed to be their biggest concern with both the APIs and with Catena-X.
But one thing that I always like to stress, if you're a tier one out there and you want more standardization, you've got to get involved at AIAG and get involved in the EDI advisory work group where we're going to be looking at the APIs, get involved with AIAG, with Catena-X. You have to let your voice be heard because you can't just say, I don't have the standard. They need to hear what you need to have at AIG, and that is the best place to do it.
Yeah, well, Sanjay talked about the risk of inaction, and I guess that's a living example, right? If you don't engage and you're not at the table, then don't complain later on. But I guess the point is engage now while you can and be a volunteer and get your voice heard. So the risk of inaction is not letting people know what you need and what you want.
And I've seen it work many times. And Fred, you have too.
Yeah, absolutely. Terry, I guess I would add, it's with Catena-X and the potential for Catena-X to go so much further down the supply chain that it's not just the tier ones that need to be involved. It's the tier 2s, 3s, 4s. As the potential for Catena-X hits what I think it's going to hit, they should all have a voice.
Absolutely.
What was the question, Terry, about QAD's involvement in the OEM messaging? What was that about at the end? I didn't quite understand that.
Sure. In our November release, we are going to put out standard OEM messages, and we're starting with Honda first, and then the others will follow. So we'll have a library for our customers to go grab Honda and be able to use that in the product or whatever OEM that they're looking for. So that's starting in November, and we're starting first with Honda, and then the others are going to be released after.
I love that because so often we hear about communication coming from the OEMs, making its way all the way through the tiers. And, EDI was probably the first example of that actually happening, becoming a reality. So now I'm hearing here's something else that's coming along the lines to bolster communication from the OEM through the supply chain.
I have a question, speaking of bolstering through the supply chain, and this is kind of Catena-X, but it's also OEM, and it ties it back to Jenny. One of the things that Jenny had said, Jenny Smith, she was on our podcast, she's a tier 2. She was mentioning when information comes down with the why, it's so much more helpful. So here she is sitting at tier 2. I need to know what happened, why, and that helps me to respond better. And I was wondering, would that be something Catena-X could do? Take the OEM bulletins, put them out there so that anybody that needs to grab it could be able to get it? Because I was always thinking about that communication, because you would probably start with the bulletin if a plant was going down or if demand really changed one day. But do you think Catena-X could do that? Because you hear that all the time. The lower tiers are craving for that information.
Yeah, I mean, it's multi-tier, multi-tenant, right? So yeah, theoretically, it would be a great way to conduit information down quicker than supplier bulletins, to your point, I think, right? So
and it's, it's the why, right, that needs to be passed down the supply chain. So
I think that's a great observation. That's one I hadn't, as a use case, I hadn't even thought about. But I think that's a great observation. And I think that's what Catena-X is being built for.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really excited about Catena-X and really, truly being able to get something down the supply chain. Because you can get it one tier, but you can't get it all the way down. And I think that's the huge promise of Catena-X.
Yeah, so Fred, we're here at the Midwest Users Conference for QAD, and we're hearing a lot of different perspectives from the audience members. What do you think the peers in the room are getting out of the conference? What do you think they could look to learn this next day and a half or so? What is your perspective on that?
There's so much about QAD I've learned. I mean, just in the short time I've been here, the libraries that, Terry, that you were talking about and the ease of doing that, I'm hoping that tomorrow you hear more questions about Catena-X and what effect that might have.
Great.
Okay. Any closing thoughts, Fred, that you would like to share regarding the future of EDI? Because we know our audience just loves it when you talk about that.
So I guess I would say thank you for having me out here. For me, I really want to help get EDI to whatever it's going to be next. In my personal opinion, the more I learn is APIs will be there to augment and complement. EDI will still be here when I retire in 10, 15, 20 years, depending on my plan. But I think APIs are really going to start playing more of a role as we move forward and helping our industry get there. And the more we're out here and talking about it, I think the faster and easier it's going to be for the industry.
That's right. So get out here, get to user conferences, join AIAG, listen to the podcast. It's all about collaboration and getting involved. And that's a beautiful way to close today. Fred Coe, thank you.
Thank you.